This podcast is sponsored by A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated. By Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Experience the difference an independent pharmacy can make for you and your loved ones. HPCP offers personalized care, short wait time, very competitive pricing, easy transfer of your prescription, and much more. And by Molly Maid. During these times of COVID-19, it has never been more important to keep your family safe. With the Healthy Home Cleaning System, Molly Maid London is here to help. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you may be tuned in. We welcome you back to another edition of the Vickers Crossing podcast. The Vickers Crossing is a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. And we have merch, as Kevin's so delicately pointing out. Good. It's good to have everybody back. We're underway with our third season of the Vickers Crossing after a little bit of a break and coming back from some vacation. So we're glad to be back at it with a boatload of guests over the next 8 weeks or so, including our guest today, which we will invite informally coming up in just a few minutes. Hello, Kevin.
Hi. I'll just be quiet here in the background until my time.
All right, good.
Oh, you won't be quiet.
Yeah, no. I was going to say, I'll do your sponsor reads, but no, that gets complicated.
Yeah.
You guys do your business.
And again, in case you've forgotten who we are, my name is Rob Henderson, and I'm the priest at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Anglican Church here in London.
And I happen to be Kevin George, who I'm the priest at St. Aidan's Church here in London.
And I'm Ian. I am the person that they dragged in to do all of the technical stuff.
Now, wait a minute, Ian.
That's not exactly fair. Like what is it you were doing before you came on the podcast today, Ian?
Today or like in general?
Well, today is just good as any, or in general. What is it you're teaching?
I was teaching ukulele I was just teaching ukulele. It was great.
Okay, good.
Yeah, cool. I didn't know you played ukulele. This is bad on my part.
He plays everything.
Yeah, I knew you play guitar because I've seen you play guitar and listened to you play guitar, but ukulele too.
Yeah. I heard on CBC radio one time about 10 years ago, I heard a piece and they interviewed this guy and they said the ukulele is an instrument made for idiots. And so I talked about this may be the thing for me because I'm the village idiot. And someone went out and got me a ukulele and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to learn it. But I'm too big of an idiot to even learn the ukulele.
You can't learn the instrument for the idiots.
Yeah, no.
All right. Well, good. Well, I'm glad everybody's back and hope everybody had a good time off, a little bit of a break. We'll check in here with each other in just a minute. But as we start our third season, we want to say thank you and welcome back to one of our sponsors and also welcome in a couple of new sponsors to the Vickers Crossing podcast that are going to be helping us out this year. So as we kick off year 3, again, want to say hi to our good friends at A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family owned and operated. And a big thank you to Dave Mullen, who is back with us again. Dave's been a great supporter of the podcast from the day when we ran into Dave and Deb over at the convention center in London. We have our big synod meeting there every year in the Diocese of Huron, and they were in a booth across from us as we were bantering on. And Dave was good enough to come over and talk to us and ask what we were doing, really liked what we were doing, and offered to sponsor the podcast. He really gave us a nice boost to get things moving forward. So thank you, Dave, and thanks to A. Miller George. We're glad you're back with us.
And we're happy to say, and if I can add, he didn't just sponsor us. He showed up at the pub where we're recording at the time at Crossings and bought beer and gave us a check to help produce it. So way to go, Dave. We love you, buddy. And we're happy to welcome a couple of new sponsors, and I will share one with you. It's Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Some of you may remember during last season, we interviewed Carol Basada, who is the owner, operator of and pharmacist at Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, experience the difference an independent pharmacy can make for you and your loved ones. Hyde Park Care Pharmacy offers personalized care, short wait time, very competitive pricing, easy transfer of your prescriptions from wherever you have them now over to her. and so much more. And I can testify to that because I went in after she supported us and came on to the 55 hours for hope we had and all that stuff. And I said, I'd like to have it. What do I need to do? She said, where's your pharmacy? Told her. She did the rest. And now I get all my drugs from Carol.
All right.
And our third sponsor is Molly Maid. Now, during these times of COVID-19, it has never been more important to keep your family safe. With the Healthy Home Cleaning System, Molly Maid London is here to help. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. And many thanks to Trisha Starr for that also.
Right, Trisha. Very good.
All right,
yeah.
Very good. Well, good. Well, thanks to all our sponsors, and we're glad to have you aboard. We're looking forward to a great third season here. Okay, well, let's just do a quick check-in with each other. We've been away on a little vacation and breaks over the last month or so. So, Kevin, how was your time off? I know you're back today.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it's weird this year, right? This sort of staying home and doing nothing and nowhere to go. And I miss getting out to Newfoundland. Usually we're there this time of year.
Yeah.
So I missed that. We're banned from the province. The health minister there said, if you're one of these people who likes to come home to visit family, this is not your year.
Yeah.
So it's not my year.
Stay where you are.
So we did take a week away and went up to a little sort of cottage and had a good time together. Just Catherine and I, quiet, some books, some time in the fresh air. And that was good. Did have a whole bunch of merch come in while I was on vacation. So there are some of these shirts if you're interested. We have T-shirts as well. And we've sold over 50 of these mugs. So if you don't have yours yet, you let us know and we'll make sure to hook you up.
Kevin, we gotta get you a mug, okay, buddy? We're gonna send one down your way.
Yeah.
All right. This will be the rage in Hamilton.
That's what I've been at. What about you?
Yeah, same thing. I took some time off in July, but really didn't go anywhere. We had a trip planned to go out west to visit my son Brett, who's in Jasper, Alberta, works up at the Fairmont Lodge up there, and we're going to go out and visit him and see the mountains and all that. But didn't really feel right getting into an airplane and going through all that and hotels and such. So we decided to cancel the trip. So it was a quiet few weeks, but got some golfing in, some day trips, saw family, and just had some quiet time. So that was good. What about you, Ian?
Well, you guys were off vacationing. I got hired to do ukulele teaching, like I said, and video editing for the Northwest London Community Center. So that's what I've been doing, and it's been a lot of fun. There's some great people over there.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
He also got himself hired at St. Aidan's Church.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, he's at 2 jobs now. So he's here, and part of his responsibility is this work that he's doing right here.
And Kevin Makins, our guest, is actually on vacation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm currently in peak relaxation mode.
All right.
All right. And you're spending it with us?
Yeah. So if I fall asleep, it's not you guys. I'm
So
just using naps for the first time in a while.
So this will tell you just how destructive COVID is to people's vacations. This intelligent, well-spoken, wonderful person is here with us on his vacation.
Well, you don't really know me yet. You know my editor is good, and we'll see beyond that.
That's good.
One of the things we like to do, Kevin, on our podcast is just have a little fun before we get into the real hard hitting stuff. So we're debuting. We're glad you're here today because we're debuting a brand new game on the Vickers Crossing.
Oh, so dang! I did my research and didn't find any games in your old episodes. Okay, here we go.
No, this is brand new. This is brand new.
Season 3 newness.
So we're calling this this new game. Are you ready, Ian? We're calling it Sickness or Suds. Sickness or Suds. And this is how
a theme song. When you said you're ready, Ian, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a theme song.
We have a
Should
theme
we make
cat,
a theme
apparently.
song?
Their theme cat. Yeah,
Well, you wouldn't have heard it right now, but when you listen to this back, you will hear that theme music.
Right. On a ukulele.
Yeah.
Right.
Played by Kevin.
So here's how we play Sickness or Suds. It's really simple. I'm going to give you a word or phrase. You have to tell me, is it a sickness or a sud? Is it a disease or an illness,
virus,
or is it a appropriate adult beverage?
A craft beer.
Like
That's
a
right.
stud? Is a
Something like
stud
that.
a beer?
Suds. S-U-D-S.
Was like, you scrub things with suds.
No.
You stick around with us long enough.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh my
bottle of suds
self is I only drink ciders. I'm useless to you all. All right,
Very
I'll do
well.
my best.
Okay, here we go.
I said earlier, if you're a hypochondriac, you really like this because you'll know every illness and disease that could possibly be had.
Oh no, I'm about to
So
focus as not a hypochondriac. Okay, let's do it.
So the words or phrase today are the green flash. The green flash. Is it a
Superhero.
sickness
Is that's not an
or
option?
is it a sud?
The green flash definitely sounds like some sort of infection you'd get that flash like goes right down your leg and then boom, your whole leg's green.
Okay.
So but it sounds too much fun to be a sickness. Like doctors who name sicknesses, they just like to claim their own name, and be like, this is my name, a horrible disease. So I'm going to go, even though I feel like it sounds like it would be a fun sickness, it's definitely got to be a beer of some kind.
Okay, so we're leaning toward a sud. Okay.
We're doing a sud.
All right, Ian, what do you think? The green flash.
I kind of agree with Kevin on this one, because in my head it sounds like a poke at like Irish kind of stuff. Because like when you think green, you think of like Ireland and like things like that. So I think I'm gonna go with a sud also.
Well, to be a contrarian, I'm going to have to say it's some form of sickness. I envision it to be something to do with the eyes, green flash.
So 2 votes for suds and 1 vote for sickness.
What do we got, Robbie?
The green flash is actually a beer.
Ooh,
that is brewed in the U.S. It's a U.S. West Coast IPA, and it's brewed in San Diego, California.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say all
flash.
the details.
All right, the green flash. All right.
So if you do wake up in the middle of the night and your eyes are flashing, it's not the green flash.
I've had the green.
Don't worry.
Discover a disease that makes your body turn green and call it the green flash. It's a great sickness name.
Oh yeah,
we'll come up with one.
I just want to say for the record, I've had the green flash.
And how'd you turn out?
Well, no, I didn't drink it. I had the sickness, the green flash.
All right, so that's sickness or suds. We'll come up with another one on our next podcast, okay? And our final little thing that we want to do is once again bring Ian in to answer all the questions that have been on people's minds since the dawn of time. This is a special part of the podcast we like to call Ask Ian Anything. All right, so we got a question today for Ian, Kevin?
We do. We've been on a roll with questions from the Beehive, the Churchyard Beehive. Last number of episodes, if you were listening down to the end of last season, we had a number of questions come from the Peter Anderson, who's the beekeeper apprentice, Jen, his partner, who's learning the trade, the beekeeper daughter, Kate, and this week's comes from the beekeeper daughter, Amelia. And Amelia wants to know.
Did we interview Amelia or no?
No, we interviewed Kate.
Right.
So Amelia, the beekeeper child, would like to know, also known as Mimi, what do you consider the most overrated virtue?
Like in a human?
Yeah. Well, we're assuming it's in a human, yes.
Or your cat.
Now, for the viewers who don't know, can you describe what a virtue is again?
Oh, well, virtues are like honesty, a virtue would be generosity, kindness, all good things, virtues.
I think I have my answer.
Okay.
I think empathy is the most overrated for this specific reason, because you shouldn't value someone for being empathetic. It should be a natural thing to be empathetic. You shouldn't be like, hey, you're not a bad person, so you must be a good person. It means, hey, you're a decent human being, so like, nice. You're not awful. Like you shouldn't be a dick.
Shouldn't
basically.
be a dick.
Yeah.
Like
get the T-shirt, folks.
Shouldn't be a dick.
I like that because what I hear him saying is like, we right now, like if the president can string together a full sentence, we're like, oh wow. Or if he pivots for a second and says something that hints at empathy, everybody goes, oh well, look at that, he's so kind. It's like, what? Look, a bar has been set so low, right? Where that should be a given. I like that. What about you, Robbie? What do you think?
An overrated virtue.
Yeah.
Boy, my first thought was, I don't know if you can overrate a virtue. Can you?
True. I agree with that.
I mean,
but-
I got to find some virtue in every virtue. I mean, I would hope. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
All right. What about you,
I think
Makins?
what's overrated.
I feel like, it used to be a virtue to greet each other warmly with a holy kiss, but I think that is in this season pretty overrated.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are good
Okay.
answers. I don't know what I would say. I'm like Robbie. I don't know what I would say, but I do like Ian's answer. I like the notion that I remember a couple of years ago, my brother sent me a news piece from Newfoundland about how everybody got all excited about a dude to stop and change the tire for somebody in a parking lot. And everybody made the news. It made the evening news. And he was like, why is this making the evening news? Like, this should be who we are. Like,
Well, it's a great question because it really makes you look at where we are and how far we've fallen in a lot of ways.
That
right?
Mimi,
You know? Yeah.
she
Like,
thinks
you
she's
know.
Proust. Honest to
Yeah.
God, she thinks she's
Yeah.
Proust.
Yeah, big time. All right. Well, good. Let's get to our guest here, who's coming to us from Hamilton on his vacation, and we don't want him to wait any longer. So, Kevin, would you introduce Kevin, please?
Sure, I will. Kevin to Kevin. What a great name you have, by the way.
It's, I wish it's got a little bland, but it's
What?
it's fine.
Kevin.
Look, I'm insulting myself. I'm not. Your Kevin is great. Kevin,
Okay, good.
Ah,
I saw
Kevin
I saw
Makins?
I saw a tweet the other day that leads me to believe they're going to turn Kevin into the Karen, the male version of Karen.
Some of us are
really?
campaigning
Yeah.
that not the
I'm not
case.
liking that very much.
Oh,
The
no.
middle name is Bored, so I can
Yeah,
always
yeah.
switch over to a more generic white guy name. Bored.
All right, Kevin. So Kevin is the founding pastor of Eucharist Church in downtown Hamilton, which is here in Canada, as most of you here in Canada will know. This church has been recognized as one of the most creative and innovative churches in the country, a frequent speaker at conferences and churches pre-COVID. Kevin also performs one-man shows in bars and makes videos for thousands on YouTube. His audience includes the faithful and the skeptical, those hungry to learn, and those who just want to hear a good old story. He lives in an old house downtown with his wife and his kids and his housemates. And we're glad that you're now going to be joining the illustrious company of the alumnus of the Vickers Crossing. Welcome.
I can feel the glow already. It's starting at my neck. It's moving its way up.
Okay. Well, that doesn't sound like a crap beer.
The green rush. or
That's
whatever.
the green flash. Yeah, that's the green
flash.
flash, Kevin.
You're
Be
getting the
careful.
green flash. Well, Kevin, I think you got a sense for what we're doing here on the podcast. I actually had you recommended to me by someone who had come on to a book study we did here. A friend of yours, whose name is just eluding me now, but she said you should talk to my friend in Hamilton who started the church, and then you reached out. So I was glad to hear from you.
Mhm.
So I think you get a sense that we talk about faith and its intersectionality with the public square or the public commons. In your book, you write about the importance of place more than once, but at one point you write, when we integrate church and place, things get practical very quickly. We talk about helping refugees in Syria, but church says to us, there's a family from Liberia just down the street. We post online about global conflict, but church says there's a neighborhood association that needs a new member. We want to educate the world, but church reminds us there's an after-school tutoring program happening every Tuesday. You go on in your book to talk about the importance of finding our place, which is right under our feet. And I wonder if you can tell us more about that, talk about that, perhaps specifically tell us about Eucharist Church and how your community interacts with the commons or the public square and how it's found its place.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, my love of downtown Hamilton came before even my love of the church. I was raised in the church and really appreciated the church, raised in a Lutheran church and valued it, but really fell in love with Hamilton. And then as I became more and more engaged in the church, I started realizing that if the church was going to have any sort of meaningful role in the life of our country and the life of our city, it was going to have to reflect that city in ways that actually made sense. So it wouldn't make sense to say, yeah, we got a church service here on Sunday. It's pretty much the same as anywhere else in the world or anywhere else in the country you'd go. There's nothing that's distinct about this place, about this culture, about these people. It's kind of just a copy and paste. That just didn't seem very compelling. because the city, I mean, Hamilton, my city is just flipping weird, man. Like it's just a weird place. It's an ex-steel town. It's got tons of poverty, but it's also got a ton of resilience and organic community work. There's, a vibrant art scene. There's also issues of gentrification. People getting priced out. There's cycling communities and tons of different cultures overlapping. And so for the church to kind of come in and say, and we're the church, and we are just trying to do what church has always done in the way it's always done, copy and paste. It didn't feel like church planting to me as much as church. I don't know. I'm not a gardener, but I'd say it's the difference between dropping a big tree into a garden from another place and assuming that the soil can take it and that the environment is going to grow it, and throwing down some different seeds and seeing which ones grow from the ground up organically. And so as we started, we didn't really have a big plan. We didn't have a budget or a strategy or anything like that. We just started by trying things out, by living downtown. We lived downtown for a couple of years before we started the church. My wife ran a business. We got to know people through that. We got a sense of the feel of the city, the different people that lived here, the different worlds that overlapped, the history. I'm born and raised Hamiltonian, so I had a sense of the city already, but we really had to get to know the neighborhoods that we were moving into. And so when we started a church, I think that while not perfect and while not a perfect reflection, it did become a reflection of the city, or at least of parts of the city that maybe the church hadn't been able to reflect quite as clearly before. And that was part of our role within the wider body, was to pick up on some of these seeds maybe that hadn't grown up in the garden of our city, and to cultivate those and nurture those so that the church that grew out of this plant, a decade ago, would look different and distinct from the other parts of the body of Christ, while still belonging to that, while still being tied to that. We're in deep relationship with them, but that it would come up and be an organic reflection of a different kind of faith expression or church expression. Right. So in a lot of ways, our church looks perfectly normal, like many other churches, but both the kind of structures of our congregation, the building that we meet in, and especially the people that are a part of our church are super tied in to civic issues, to neighborhood issues. And the question we're always asking is, how does a big topic overlap in my neighborhood? So when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, anti-Black racism, how does that show up in my neighborhood? Not just in my country, not just in America, because we like reading a lot of American news, but there's racism, surprise, in our neighborhood. So how do we be aware of that? When we're talking about housing crisis, how do we not generalize this, but how do we say, no, let's get specific. What are the housing crises in my neighborhood, and how does that affected by my presence, and how do I help cultivate that? Same with Syrian refugees that came in a couple of years ago, and on the ongoing issues of refugees trying to find home. This can't be, how do we help every refugee everywhere? Because we're really not that good at people. But we, even bad people like us, or mediocre Christians like us, can help the refugees that are crossing through our city, and especially in our neighborhoods. So a lot of that parish value, the idea of marking off some land and calling it our responsibility, or receiving it from God as our responsibility, that became a big part of our identity and is still one of our defining values as a congregation.
I think that's interesting, actually, just in that last little bit about parish, because in our modern context, and we talk about this in the Anglican world, of course, we use the word parish a lot, but I don't think we understand it the way we used to understand it. For instance, when George Herbert wrote about being a country person and being in the parish, that the idea was that geographically, you were in a place. There was place under your feet, and as people of faith, you had a responsibility in that place, not just a pastor, but the people too. And so that sort of mentality of being parochial, not in the narrow sense, but in the sense of actually understanding the importance of being present to everything that's going on in your community.
Yeah, and really in our case, the people that best model this aren't even the paid staff, like myself and my co-pastor Jill. We do our best to model this in our parishes, like the neighborhoods we live in.
Yeah.
But our whole congregation, the vast majority of them live within about a 5 or 6 kilometer radius of one another.
Yeah.
And we've always marked out, a couple kilometers as our parish. So even if you come in from somewhere else, we want you to be attentive to your neighborhood, but we as a congregation feel that we have a responsibility to a particular geography. And so we have been able to mark that out. And what that means is that the people in our church who move into this area or already live in this area, they're able to do things that you could not hire enough staff to do what they're doing. They're volunteering at neighborhood food programs and cafes that do great street work and outreach and inreach. They're the ones that are taking care of the local food co-op or the high rise in their neighborhood where they're making friends. There are people in our congregation who can do so much more than the paid staff of our church, because we're not a huge budget church. And so we're just trying to model that and shape a culture where that is normal, where it's normal to not volunteer at church every night, but instead to get on a neighborhood association, where it's normal to make friends with your neighbors without a goal to convert them, but just to genuinely witness to the life of Christ that you've witnessed, and to get to know them as equals in your neighborhood and experience that mutuality. These are all things that, to get involved in your kids' schools, the public schools, not to try to get your kids off to the Christian school where they might be able to get a more siloed education. Nothing against Christian school. I went to a Christian university for a little while and then I dropped out, but
my dream is to drop out of a Christian school.
Yeah, I made it a year and a half. I met a cute Dutch girl and then I was done.
Yeah, good for you.
But no, nothing wrong with that. But trying to shape a culture in a community where the default is what is right below your feet. That going somewhere else is not going to solve issues. Trying to tackle the biggest issues is probably not a great use of your energy. For all of the vitriol that people around us feel about American politics,
yeah,
most of us have had zero impact in American politics.
Yeah.
The idea, it just makes me feel sick. The idea that there are people spending dozens and dozens or hundreds or thousands of hours worried about American politics, and there's neighbors on their street who need help.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's like
right in front of them. Yeah.
At a certain point,
true.
it's like, well, what are we getting by being so angry and so stressed?
Mm-hmm.
We must be getting something from this if we're going to spend so much energy doing this. There are a few people who feel called into that kind of work. I'm not talking about everyone here.
Right. Yeah.
But the vast majority of us, it's just a consumption of the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time you turn off your frickin' phone, walk outside, and you're going to instantly collide with neighbors who really need help. And where all the big issues that you're rallying against and stressed about online are going to intersect right in your face. So go online, get resources, do what you got to do learning wise. But then, for God's sake, turn off your phone, get to know your neighbors, and put some of that energy into a place where you can actually have a tangible, meaningful impact.
Right. I wanted to explore this idea that you mentioned earlier about church in general, because your book is about going to church and what church is and that sort of thing in your experience. And you said earlier that when you wanted to start things in Hamilton, you were uncomfortable with this idea of just dropping something that existed in through people's eyes in a certain way and saying, okay, here we are, because it's going to be like everything else. And so, which is really about who we are and who we see ourselves as the church, right? And I was thinking about one of my favorite authors is Brian McLaren, who wrote Great Spiritual Migration. It was a big popular book study we recently did in my parish. And in it, he talks about moving away from churches being these centers that are obsessed with just belief and what we believe. And that came to mind when I was reading your book. Because you read about the church as a community that's called out, as you're just mentioning, out of a normal way of being to follow Jesus. So I want to if I could just read a little portion of your book for folks.
Oh yeah, whenever people do that, I feel like I'm on On Being or something. I feel like you're...
Oh no.
You're having actually an out of body experience. Just stick with it.
Yeah. So just listen to your voice here, Kevin.
If you see a green flash, look away.
That's right. No, but this is a great part of the book that I enjoyed. And you write, many of us were taught that we needed to believe the right things to belong in the church. But maybe we don't need to have all our intellectual opinions sorted out before we start to follow Jesus. If church is a community of people called by God to move toward Jesus, then it is perfectly acceptable to walk with others in that direction, even if you don't know what you personally believe. Eucharist Church celebrates communion every Sunday afternoon, and we are quick to remind people that this table does not belong to our church. It is Jesus' table. and he welcomes all who desire to come to him, whether they have a lot of faith or just a tiny mustard seed of belief. So, could you tell us a bit more about that? Maybe your model of discipleship based around that understanding, and because like a lot of people, when they do think of the church, it's and I've heard people say, "Well, I can't go or I won't go because I don't believe all that, or I wouldn't fit into that." But this is a different way of seeing things.
Yeah, I mean, and we are not experts at this. We are figuring this out as we go, just like anybody else.
Hmm.
But yeah, what we found was, you see Jesus in the Gospels. He spends very little time trying to convince people that God exists. Right? It's just not a
Hmm.
big part of what he does.
No.
Now, part of that's because he's speaking to, a monotheistic Jewish audience. But even when he interacts with people of other faiths and religions, he doesn't spend much time trying to convince Samaritans or Syrophoenicians that they should believe certain things, which maybe the more like liberal or progressive church has taken and run with to say, yeah, it doesn't really matter what you believe at all. Like the more extreme fringes of maybe church worlds, which I don't find helpful, because if we don't name something that we believe, we're going to end up just believing in Netflix and believing in Instagram. Like the world is not neutral. We're going to be shaped by something. So if you stop confessing the creeds, you will confess a creed, whether stated or unstated, because the world's not neutral. The conservative church, though, has not done much good on this either, because we've essentially made church out to be a place where you go and you state your little beliefies and you say, I believe these things. And you go, cool, what's that mean? And you go, I think it in my head. It's like, you think Jesus did all that stuff so you could think a thought in your head? So, it's not always helpful to name two extremes and find the middle. But I think in this case, there is something helpful about naming that the one side is there's this rigidity that is so rigid that if you don't know what you believe, if you don't really know what you think about things, if your beliefs are changing, if you have doubts, then this is not a safe space for you. And you need to either get in line or you need to go. But on the kind of more leftist edge, you might have this space where it's hard to know if you believe in anything. And so doubt is the ultimate virtue. And stating anything with any sort of confidence or conviction is seen as being aggressive. And I don't think that's helpful either. So what we've tried to model, and this is we're still a living experiment. We've tried to model a way of functioning where everyone is free to believe whatever they want. Because at the one level, I can't change their mind. Have you ever tried to change what someone thinks? It never works. In fact, it usually just makes them double down on their perspective that you're pushing against.
Yeah.
So we try to create a non-anxious space. We go, listen, you are the beloved of God, whether you believe in God or not. Right? You have been saved from your sin, whether you accept the reality of that or not. That Christ came, I believe it's in 1 John. I think it's 1 John 3:16, the other 3:16. But, if somebody looks that up and they get, but, that the sins of all people have already been dealt with. The question is whether you put your trust in that or not. So, there's no fundamental reality about God's love for any person that changes if they believe in it or not. But your capacity to receive and live in that love is certainly affected.
Yeah.
So we would try to say, let's create a non-anxious space where you come, figure it out as you go, where you get to see a bit of the life of Jesus before you have to figure out if you believe in the way of Jesus, where you can experience some of the transformation of Christ through the love of others, through the Eucharist, through spiritual direction. Come and experience that before you've been able to articulate it with words. But what we've tried to do to not make that end up kind of endlessly floating out into abstract ideas is we try to say that we as a community believe in something. So we communally confess something. I even like the word confession more than belief, because belief is too tied to your brain. But we confess a way of being that is anchored in the ancient creeds, the Nicene and Apostles' Creed, as a baseline to say, this is what we believe is fundamentally true about reality. We believe in the story of Scripture. We believe in its Cole's notes here in the Nicene Creed. We confess it because every Christian has confessed this for a very long time. When people say, why the creeds and not something else? My answer is just because it's old. I'm like, because it's so old.
Yeah.
I mean, anything else we come up with is something we made up a week ago. Let's just go with something old that can be confessed by Orthodox, by Catholic, by Protestant. And so we confess that. But Nadia Bolz-Weber was the first person I heard really articulate this well, where she said, just because we believe something doesn't mean that every individual here believes everything every day or every week. Right. There are going to be seasons where you struggle to believe in the life of the world to come. There are going to be seasons where you struggle to believe in the resurrection of the dead. but we communally aim in that direction.
Right.
We communally shape our lives in that direction. We're not going to spend time debating and fighting about these things because we can't debate and fight about everything. So we're going to take these things on faith. We're going to take them on trust, on allegiance. We're going to give our allegiance to Christ and to this summary note of his life, though it's not perfect. But we're going to start with that. And then as we walk together in that direction, we're going to hope that everyone can, over their lifetime, believe and put their trust in that and in more than that. But that is kind of our foundation.
Right.
And with that corporate vision, you now are free as individuals to come with all your doubts, all your questions, all your hangups, and to know that there is something that you can sit on, something you can put your trust in, which is the historical confession of the church through time and space.
And it's a wide welcome, Matt, because you can come in and say, gee, you mean I can be broken, unhinged, confused, and messed up and still be able to be a part of something? Whereas before, the understanding of church was, at least I grew up with this, was once you get your beliefs in order, then you'll click in. Right?
Yeah, you can do your testimony the Sunday after you fixed your problems.
Right, exactly.
And I think what we have found fruitful about this is that it also has teeth to it. Like not everyone I meet on the street is going to be able to believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. This has teeth to it. This isn't saying that the Christian faith doesn't have beliefs and things that we confess that are difficult. There's still something difficult in here. But there's also a beautiful wideness. So there's, to quote Clark Pinnock, there's a wideness in God's mercy for who is received here. Well, also a particular path, a compelling path that we can follow that is well worn by the history of the church.
I like it.
I don't know if it's right. I just know that the old way wasn't great either. So.
I'm just not sure. I'm not sure if the metric is right and wrong. To me, what I like about this is this conversation you're having is that, and specifically as it relates, for example, to the table and the notion of an open table. It's an acknowledgement that what we're doing is not ours, that it's not mine, it's God's. What I do, somewhere in one of the books I read earlier in the summer, it talked about sunflowers always turning toward the sun, right? Like it's that notion of that you write about in your book, which I don't think we've ever said the name of, which is Why Would Anyone Go to Church? It looks like that. But it's that notion of the community moving faithfully together, even when we don't know where we're going. It's that MLK thing, about you don't know where every stair is, but you put your foot in on the step anyway, right? You don't need to know where the next thing is to actually journey toward it. And that's actually very good. I think it's what our communities need to be brought into.
Being together. Yeah.
Ian, you had a question for
Kevin, sorry. I was caught up in my cat that decided to come on screen for a little bit.
Here, kitty. Where's Elf when you need him? Who remembers Elf?
Elf, yeah. Old guy.
So Kevin, the other Kevin, has told me that you have something called Nap Sunday.
Yes.
What is that? And that sounds amazing. So, can you elaborate on it?
Don't get too excited, Ian. We're not
Ian
bringing
loves
naps.
that. Yeah.
We're not bringing Nap Sunday in when we go back.
I love napping, so that sounds wonderful.
Nap Sunday is the peak of the liturgical year and the height of holiness. And the one thing I hope every church steals from us. I don't think very much we're doing is universally applicable, but I know that Nap Sunday is universally applicable. Every culture, every place, Nap Sunday can work. So Nap Sunday was our attempt to play with liturgy, which has been something that we've done. We don't do liturgy particularly well. When people from low church backgrounds come in, they go like, wow, you're really liturgical. And when people with even an ounce of liturgy come in, they're like, what are you doing? This is bad. So yeah, we call it, sometimes we call it liturgy for mutts. But yeah, we like to play with the church calendar. We like to play with events in the life of the church, mostly coming out of a conviction that much like the Sabbath, the church calendar was made for us, not us for the church calendar. It's a gift. It's not God. So we, on the Sunday after Christmas, which is like the most exhausting time because everybody's been running around. You've had Christmas Eve service, you've had candlelight service, you've had, maybe Advent projects you've done. We would do art installations in Advent, and, everyone's fried. They've been running around seeing family, staying up late, wrapping gifts, eating way too much food. And then they'd come to church the Sunday after Christmas. And, like most pastors, I would throw the intern in to preach because it's like, I don't want to come up with a sermon the week of Christmas. And we just realized, if everybody's exhausted, why are we pretending that everyone's not? This has been a question we've asked over and over is, whenever there's something that's different, how do we own it instead of pretending that it's not different? Even in this COVID time, when we start gathering again in the fall, it's not going to try to look like it was before. We're just going to say, look, for a year, 2 years, who knows? Things are going to be different. So let's meet at different times, different places, different ways. And then we'll miss what used to be. When we get to have it back, we'll be excited. But rather than pretending, in the summer, rather than pretending that it's, everybody's here, if it's only half the size, why don't we own that it's half the size? And what could we only do with 60 people that we couldn't do with 120? Right. And so we started asking, well, what could we do with the Sunday after Christmas if everyone is exhausted? So that's how we came up with the idea for Nap Sunday, which is where everyone wears pajamas and they bring pillows and stuffies if they've got them. They bring their favorite kind of cereal. And then we all meet in the sanctuary. And instead of a sermon, when the sermon time comes up, everybody gets their own space in the building. They get their own pew and they lay it with their pillows on the floor, on the pews. They hang out in the balcony. They kind of spread across the space. And everybody closes their eyes, and every 10 minutes we have somebody read Jesus' teachings on anxiety and worry. His do not worry about tomorrow, it will worry about itself. They read that quietly into the microphone. Then there's 10 minutes of silence, and then they read it again, 10 minutes of silence. And after about 30, 35 minutes of napping, we say, all right, everybody slowly rise up, and everyone wakes up and stretches out and yawns, and then we invite them up to the table, and it's communion. And what sounds like kind of a silly exercise, a lot of people laugh at it, but what it is for me is a deeply theological statement, which is, what is grace? I'm a good Lutheran, raised in the Lutheran church. Grace was so huge for us. Well, what is grace? Grace is snoring in church. Grace is.
I've heard a lot of it.
Yeah. Grace is falling asleep, learning nothing. There is no theological improvement. There is no moral, ethical improvement. You have not self-improved in any way since you've been here. And now come to the table. The table is for you. The table's for you as you are, as you walked in, not as the newly transformed you or the you that commits to try harder, the you that kind of sucks, the you that is tired. That's the you that is welcome to Christ's table exactly as you are. And so it actually has become quite a profound theological statement to intentionally not learn anything and to sleep and to rest, and then to come forward and know that Christ is for us all the same, and our place at the table is already secured.
Yeah, and I was reading that in the book, Kevin, and you're talking about it, and what I was thinking about was what I really liked was it pushes back on that cultural narrative too, especially at that time of year, that tells us that the busier we are, and the more we do, and the more people we see, and the more people we bring to church or bring to God or do. We push back on that and say, Jesus went out and took a nap.
Yeah.
There's something very holy about that, and we need to model that, and not just model this cultural narrative that tells us we got to keep going until we pass out.
Oh yeah, if we want to be a witness to the world around us about the life that God has for each of us, one of the best witnesses we can do in a world obsessed with hurry and hustle is to take a nap and waste some time. Marva Dawn and Eugene Peterson's book, A Royal Waste of Time, to describe Sabbath. Napping is a royal waste of time. And napping can be worship. When you truly give thanks for this time that you've got to just do nothing, that is an act of worship.
Right. I like it. I like the fact that I think that much of what we do is exhortation, right? So there's a lot of, we are called, and we're constantly, whether it's on a Sunday morning, where Todd Townsend, bishop and homiletics professor, would remind us not to beat people up with all these exhortations when we're preaching, but to sort of let God do the speaking in a sense. but we do, whether it's preaching on Sunday morning or in our outreach or our in-reach ministries or all the things, it's all do, as you say. Like, I mean, I don't do like do, but I mean, doing.
I mean, sometimes it just becomes so much doing that it becomes do.
Exactly.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
it's
I like doing. Like, this is not a natural. Sometimes people say, well, maybe that's easier for you. No, I am controlling weirdo. Let's go. You know, I've never seen a new thing I don't want to do.
Right.
So, but I feel like this has been God's in my life, like personally. This is the lesson that God keeps reminding me, like a merry-go-round.
It's interesting to me
every
that
single time I have a problem, it's, have you tried not doing anything? Have you
well,
tried
yeah.
relaxing?
But and I think that one of the things that for me, when I read about this, you know, I thought, well, that's incredibly creative, a bit cheeky. Yes, you can laugh at it,
Yeah.
but in reality, the theological message is actually very profound, and it's embodied in what you're doing.
Yes.
I mean, we can talk about that, or we can actually use our physical bodies as a form of worship, and we can lay down our burdens literally. And I when I read that, I was sort of taken how it's a bit of a sort of a metaphor for what we're experiencing right now through this time of COVID, which has caused us all to have to put the foot on the brake, to slow down. For those of us who have been pastoring, in some cases we've sped up, but in other ways we've had to learn to be home. I mean, I've regained a home life I haven't had in years because you know, there just wasn't places to be and things to do. I'm like you. I like to be going. So actually having the time to honor what God has given us and who we are, our own belovedness in who we are now. And we need that. If for no other reason, then we're terribly insecure. And that takes me to my next question. So,
No, terribly insecure. That's the name of my next book.
oh, I like it.
No, it's not, but it should be. That's not a bad name.
That's
My-
a really
I
good
might
title.
actually use that. Nobody use that. Don't Google it.
I'm not going to use that. The one I'm going to use is going to be an incredibly flawed human being. That's the words I use all the time. So I was taken by your honesty, actually, in the book when you write about your feelings, your insecurity, your jealousy about a church that starts up nearby, and you were incredibly frank and honest about what comes along with that, around the envy and so on. Rob and I know a little bit about this. We'd find those stories compelling because we hang out with a lot of clergy. There's a few Anglicans kicking around, and it's shocking. People won't believe this, but many of us, all of us, are a bit insecure. And I know.
What?
And and there happens to be some competition. There is sometimes that sort of need to feel like your thing is doing better. I think it's a struggle for pastors everywhere, to be honest. And so I found your chapter on that very refreshing, coming to grips with the sense of competition that we all sometimes feel. I just wonder if you can share with our listeners, our viewers, a little bit about that experience and why that was so instructive to you in terms of your own confession, as you call it in the book.
Yeah. Well, the chapter is called New Church, about when my friends planted another church in the city close to where we are. These were friends in our church network, True City, which is a network of churches in Hamilton that work together for the good of the city. This was a personal friend who was the planting pastor. The whole team that was planting was made up of people I knew, people who had come to our services in the early days and said, wow, this is so inspiring. We need to church plant out of our church. And it really was an example, even back to what you were just saying about Nap Sunday. It was a real example of the things that we believe in our heads, but we don't always believe in our hearts or in our bodies. That we can say in our head, we're all just one church. We're just one big body of Christ. And it doesn't matter which church people are a part of. All that matters is that everybody has a place they belong. And then someone opens up a church down the street and you go, hey, wait a minute, get out of here. You feel suddenly all your own hypocrisy is exposed, that a lot of these things, I might know the answer, but I don't know the way there. It's like back when you were in school and you'd answer a math question and the teacher says, show your math. I know the answer is we're all one in the body of Christ. But then if God said, show me your math, I'd go, oh, I don't really have any math. I just know the answer. So I feel like this was a real show your math moment for me, was God saying, hey, look, you've always said it doesn't matter what church people are a part of. You've always said you receive exactly who I give you, and you're not stressed about what number or what size that is. And yet, you have all these feelings of insecurity that are just below the surface. And so it's time to get at some of those. And so there's a very real human feeling when something new starts and you no longer feel like you're the cool kids in town.
Mhm.
Certainly when somebody leaves a community, that's a hard feeling. Clergy certainly feel that in a unique way, but I was struck that somebody in our church who's been here since day one texted me a photo when he was reading the book of that chapter.
Mm.
And he wrote, "This one was for me."
Mm.
You know, because anyone who's been in a church for more than 5 or 6 years, this is now your family, you know, like this isn't just a thing you go to occasionally. This is part of your fundamental to your identity, or these community of people trying to follow Jesus together. And so whenever somebody says, actually, I'm going to go follow Jesus with somebody else, or actually, I'm not going to go to the church, I'm not going to be a part of the church at all, that attacks your collective identity. And if we don't examine that, we'll get into fight or flight. You know, either we cut the person off, we ignore them, we cut off that other community, or fight, we get defensive, we start throwing shade, we start trying to find ways to justify ourselves. But the third way response is that non-anxious response that says, okay, God, what are you going to teach me through this time? So that chapter was really about me learning how to really put my body and my heart into the belief that this is God's church, that this is Christ's table, not my table, not Eucharist table, not like our church's table, Eucharist. And that we need to be able to hold an open hand, and we need to be able to receive those who God sends us, and we need to be able to release those whom God's calling somewhere else. And since learning to do that, my life has become a lot easier.
Yeah.
And actually, we've been able to name who we are with much more clarity since engaging in that. But the process of getting there was a couple of years of quite a bit of grumbly, painful work before God sort of, and if people read the chapter, they can learn more about how God broke that in me. But it was a real moment, kind of miraculous moment of breaking where suddenly realized, oh, this is not just me being grumpy. This is me being sinful. This is me intentionally damaging relationship. This bitterness is like a poison in my own heart. So even if it doesn't hurt anyone else, it's certainly going to hurt me, and that poison might hurt others. And so, the antidote of forgiveness is going to be the only way to get this toxin out of myself. And then once I've been forgiven, I can extend that forgiveness to others, and I can work towards the eradication of this toxin that was once in me. I can become a part of the solution.
I think, to echo what Kevin said, I really appreciated your honesty in that chapter. And I think it's a chapter that every pastor should read, because, and it's a great, it's a great Eucharistic theology, isn't it? That we are taken and we are blessed, and then we are broken. And out of that, we hold that bread up on Sundays. And when we were doing that back pre-March,
back in the day,
we're holding that bread up, we crack it, and we break it, and we snap it in front of everybody. And then out of that comes the grace, right?
Yeah, we become what we eat.
Right, exactly.
What we eat is a broken body. Then get yourself ready. There's no way to follow Jesus and make it through this without being broken, without pain.
Yeah, that's all part of it.
But that's how we become the wounded healers. That now
one writes about.
And it's funny that everyone. It was the one chapter I didn't want to write for obvious reasons.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Don't come off looking like a hero. And of course, then it's the one chapter that everyone has told me, this is the one. Like, this is the chapter that really hit at a different level. And that most people I've talked with seem to resonate the most with.
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking of someone that actually came to me in a previous parish, another clergy person, and their parishioner had left some time ago and started to come to my parish, and them come up to me going, "Oh, I hear that the Smiths are now coming to your church. Isn't that nice? I'm so happy for them." And it is gritting through the whole conversation, right? But that was the brokenness, right? And it was a missed opportunity, I think, for both of us to let ourselves be broken in that. When I look back on it.
Well, and I don't want to say that we shouldn't feel the pain that we feel about it, which could be a way of reading this saying, oh, well, once you get over it, then you're done. Like, no, it still hurts.
Sure.
Because love hurts. It hurts to love people. That's one of the things that's so important about the church. Is it really shows you that love requires vulnerability, and that vulnerability requires a willingness to be hurt.
Yes.
And we know that in marriage. We know that in our closest friendships. We know that in our family. But do we know that in the church? And one of the beautiful things, the guy who's the pastor of New Church, Matt, he was at my book release party, and I got to do an interview with him where I read part of that chapter and we talked about it together. And of course, he's got his stories of, oh, someone left to go to your church and it hurt me. And someone left to go, no one is spared from this. But once we started talking about it, we were laughing for the whole conversation, half an hour of laughter. So
Right.
it doesn't mean that there won't be pain, but now that we're all in the light, the Gospels text, I believe it's in John, talks about anything exposed to the light becomes a light.
That's right.
So once we expose our insecurities, our pain, our sadness, suddenly it becomes light. And then it becomes pretty damn funny that we're such little petty people, that we think we've got all this control, and that we all feel the exact same thing. Both humanizes us, and there's something divine in it, in laughter. There's an empathy that's there.
Well, we definitely are guilty of taking ourselves way too seriously.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Not us, but I need to take life more seriously. But the truth is, we take it, and to what Rob is saying, I mean, I've been there. We've all lived this, and we've lived the pain. I mean, I had 14 years in one church. I've been in this one 8. You lose people, they go on. And because I think part of what we do in community, whether you're the pastor or lay leader or whatever else, you put yourself into it, right? So it feels personal. And the one place I always come back to is, yep, this hurts, shit. Now rinse, wash, repeat. I go back, and it sounds funny for a guy with no hair to be given a shampoo analogy, but that's what it is. I mean, you love people, you're going to get hurt, and then you pick yourself up and you do it again.
If I can say something to anyone listening right now, clergy, and especially those of you who aren't clergy, because clergy, at least the pain comes with a paycheck, and I know a lot of bivocational pastors. I was bivocational for the first 5 or 6 years of Eucharist. So, that's a bit of a different thing too, but especially those of you who are in a church because you love it, because you've made it your family, because you own it. It's a potluck meal and you bring a dish every week. It is a brave act to love people. It is courageous. It is a brave thing to be a part of a church beyond when it's fun.
Yes.
But to be a part of a family for the long obedience, right. To work through trials, to forgive people, to have those painful conversations, to clarify expectations. This stuff is courageous at the highest level, but it's not flashy. You don't get a lot of social media likes for it. Nobody's going to give you a book deal because you were, really graciously a part of a community for a long time. There is not a lot of glamour, but I really, truly believe that God sees it. And I believe that God honors it. And I believe it is one of the most courageous things you can do, is that kind of thick relationship with others. And so, big props and celebration and weeping with and cheering on everyone who's listening to this, clergy, and especially those who have just long suffered in a congregation with a good attitude and trying to do the work. That is brave, courageous work, and we need to celebrate it more.
Yeah, amen. Amen. Thank you. That's great. So we were talking a bit about control and breaking and all that sort of thing, which leads me into the last question I want to ask you about, which is the chapter on the church plant boot camp.
I haven't talked about this yet. No one's asked about this.
Oh no,
not much yet. No, not yet.
That was my favorite one. That was one of my favorite. We love that one.
It was a wild situation.
Yeah, so I don't want to give it away to everybody because I want you to read the book. But in short, Kevin goes out to Vancouver for this kind of boot camp to see whether or not he's going to be able to be told whether he could plant a church, right? In general, that's what it is.
We were already a couple of years in, so it was to plant a church that already started.
They already planted. But Kevin and I have been in, and I'm sure any clergy or pastor watching this has been in this situation where you go for these meetings and these kind of workshops, and you do all this work, and at the end, somebody tells you whether or not God's calling you to do something.
Which is a big statement. If they had said, we don't think you should church plant, I'd say, look, often I don't think I should church plant. No problem.
Exactly.
Exactly. When you start saying God says this, I'm like, oh, that is confident.
Yeah, big time. But I've always found, what I want to ask you about was there's this tension in the church, because it reminds me of a mentor of mine who told me the story of someone coming in and said, I just don't like organized religion. And his response was, well, then you must be a fan of unorganized religion. So let's try that for a while. But there's this tension between the church and who God calls us to be. And the tension is between that and who we, the creature, decide we are being called to be or do. Right. And we exist in that in the institutional church, no matter what denomination we're from, because we can't be totally disorganized. We can't just walk away from having these conversations about where we need to be going. So
that was actually one of the original titles for the book, was Disorganized Religion.
oh, really?
Oh, there you go.
Perfect.
Yeah, well,
Perfect. Well, there it is. Yeah.
Someone told a friend, a woman in our church who invited a friend to church. Friend said, "I'm not into organized religion." She said, "Don't worry, we're not that organized."
Yeah. Yeah. You'll fit right in.
I
Yeah,
really
you'll
love
fit right in. Well, that's the thing. Do you think though that kind of tension is, we kind of lose the narrative though, don't we? Of when we get into these spaces where we have to kind of discern and tell each other what God's telling us to do or not to do, we kind of lose the narrative of what the church is there for in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be careful not to speak about what I don't understand, and I don't understand almost everything. So I try to be generous. Even in the book, I try to be generous with these people that I think have really missed the mark on this one. But you know what? We might need churches like the kind that they can see. You know, I'm not going to say that it's not necessary at all, but I think that if you're going to shape a discernment space, which I really do believe in, you've got to discern well, and discernment's got to be more than 20 white middle-aged men in a room, which is not to knock white middle-aged men. I'm on my way there, but is to say that the body of Christ is so much richer and so much more diverse that there may be a place for discernment with men and women and people from different backgrounds and people from different life experiences and different denominations. You get them together and do discernment. You might be able to get something, but there's things about discernment that are important. Like, for example, is the discernment the group discerning for someone, or is the group there to help someone discern? You know, in spiritual direction, you don't tell someone what God is saying. That's like the first rule. But you try to help them hear the voice of the Spirit. You know, and I also understand if you've got limited funds and you want to fund church plants or something like that, and you've got to decide who do we think has the gifts or calling to do this. So, you know, I'm not even opposed to people saying we're going to give these people money and we're not going to give these other people money. That's completely fair. But once we start saying, I'm speaking for God here, or these 8 of us, we are speaking for God, you're just overstepping, right. You know, you're just overstepping. And also, I think that it also removes the creative edges of a creative God, and it removes the edges of the church often, you know, that if you don't have a wide expression of church doing discernment, you're going to stamp out parts that look like you. So in the book, I talk about if the body of Christ is made up of all these different churches, you know, which I see very faithfully as an extension of 1 Corinthians imagery around the body, is that it's not just that every congregation is made up of different parts of the body of Christ in individuals, but that the congregations coming together are different parts of the body of Christ, global and historic. So, you know, these assessment centers, I think what often happens in denominations and assessment groups is that they're used to assessing something like a hand. And so everything that comes in the room, they're going, does it look like a hand? And if the thing looks different, then they go, oh, well, it's not a hand, therefore it's not a church. And, you know, in the book I talk about, you know, it's like we were a foot and we walked into the assessment and they said, why are its fingers so short? Right. And why is its palm so round? And you go, oh, you know, it's a foot. It's a part of the body of Christ. It's just not a hand. You know, never mind eyelashes and earlobes and all the other parts of the body of Christ. So, you know, I'm not opposed to discernment. I'm not opposed to strategy at some level. It's not my thing. I don't want to do it for work or for fun, but I'm not opposed to people stepping into those worlds. But when we do, we ought to be really, really careful and wise to know that what we are assessing is, you know, coming out of our own experiences, and to be able to help other people hear from God's Spirit. Isn't that the whole point? You know, a mentor of mine once said, Kevin, 1,000 words from Kevin are less useful than 1 word from the Holy Spirit. So, you know, I'd much rather spend time trying to help people hear the Spirit than trying to convince them that I've heard the Spirit for them.
Well, that's interesting. Like I just think my favorite part of it was where you swore at them. Again, I don't want to give it away.
I wanted one good F-bomb in the book. I was like, let me have one. It's just like a PG-13
They wouldn't let you put fucking in there.
No, they wouldn't. And I mean, I had like
it's permitted on the podcast. I'm just saying.
Oh, good. Well, I had a lot of swearing in the beginning because I swear, I don't have any shut ups in the book because I think shut up is a horrible thing to say. I don't have any, holy crap because only God is holy. So I'm quite strict on language. I just don't think the word fuck is a big deal. But
Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome here anytime.
But then they said, work it down. So I worked down to 1 and I was like, this is the right word. It's the right word at the right time for the right punch.
Yeah.
But I think my editors were correct, actually. And what they said was, don't offend with your words in your first book. This is your first book. People don't know you yet. Offend, if you're going to offend and challenge, do it with your ideas. And let the idea be the thing that turns someone off, not the language. Mm-hmm. So, no guarantee that the next books won't have some more fiery language. But I think that they were correct on that one. I don't like safe moves, but I think it was a wise move. And I can respect that.
Sure.
But it's my favorite punchline in the book. I do.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna get Kevin to hold up the book one more time before we go today.
Are you hinting on writing another book?
I am working on. I have a second book with Baker. So we did a 2-book contract, and I am working on the second book now, which will hopefully be released in about 2 years.
Good.
So here's the book.
Here's the book. We want to give one of these away to our faithful listeners, don't we?
Yeah, give it away.
I want to give away 2. Okay. So the book is called "Why Would Anyone Go to Church? A Young Community's Quest to Reclaim the Church for Good" by, right here he is, Kevin Makins. And so here's the skill testing question. So you can tweet, you can Facebook message us, you can email us at vicarscrossing at gmail.com. Either electronic medium that you want to use, and answer this question. Every one of them that we'll get, we'll throw into the hat, this hat even, and then we'll pull out a winner. We'll pull out 2 winners, and you will get your own copy free of charge of this book. Thank you to Kevin and the publishers for that. Publishers are Baker, right? Baker Books.
Baker Books, great publishing house. Thrilled.
So the skill testing question you must tweet or Facebook or email is, what church was Kevin Makins raised in? He said it on the air today. And so when you hear this, this is Wednesday, or no, this is Tuesday. You'll be listening to this on Wednesday, any day after. I'll draw on the weekend. So tweet, Facebook.
Love it.
What church was he raised in?
Good. And we encourage people to go out and buy the book. And I got it on e-format, so it's available that way as well. And Kevin, it was a great read. Really appreciated.
How about this too? I'll throw into this a complimentary audiobook code.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
All right. So we have
if anybody wants an audiobook, then you got a 3rd copy. I'll send you guys the code for it.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, we'll do that. 3 winners coming up.
Yep.
Excellent. So just before we let you go, Kevin, the final thing we like to do in the podcast is just a quick lightning round. Are you up for a few quick questions?
Let's do it. Hit me.
Okay. First question. Your nickname.
Oh, Kevin May is my only. That's just what one of my friends calls me, and I don't have many other nicknames.
Revy Kevy is taken, by the way.
I'm not even ordained. So
okay, so you're good to go.
That's a whole other story.
That's a whole podcast in its own.
I was so close to being ordained before I pulled the parachute. Maybe that'll be in the next book.
All right.
Oh. Favorite movie genre?
Oh gosh, that is a really hard one. I love a good. Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on the title. Surrealist fiction kind of stuff. So
okay.
I love movies like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
Sort of dramas, but movies that have something off about them. I love a little bit of surrealism. Pan's Labyrinth was an example back in the day. I love those kind of movies.
All right. So you grew up you're a Hamilton guy, so and a good Canadian boy. Any predictions who's going to win the Stanley Cup in this COVID year?
Oh, I have no dog in this fight. And the athletes, the sports people in my church hate it when I talk about sports on these podcasts. So I'm going to, I barely got the Habs that was a team before. I think they might be well. So, and people always are like,
got to be a Tiger Cat fan, no?
Yeah. I mean, I go and I have a beer in the stands with everybody and yell a lot. I like yelling with groups. That's fun.
Oh, that's a good thing. Yeah.
It's very good to do.
As soon as we made it in the NBA playoffs last year, I was in for the whole playoff season, but only because it was exciting. I'm not really a big sports watcher, but we have a lot of them in our chururch, so I try not to speak.
Then I'll skip my next question, which was being from Hamilton. I was going to ask you to spell Oski Wee Wee.
I can do that. OSKIE -WEE.
Very good.
Very good.
Well
done.
I'm a good Hamiltonian. I'm just a bad athlete.
And final question, and this is always a tough one, but if you weren't a pastor, what do you think you'd be doing?
I'd be a failing stand-up comic.
Okay. There you
Oh,
go.
So,
Wow.
I'd be a stand-up comedian who just isn't funny enough to make a living at it. So I'd probably, work retail or something.
wow.
All right.
Wow.
Great. Well, Kevin Makins is our guest, and we really appreciate you being here, Kevin, and giving us the time, especially on your vacation. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I'm off
it's
hanging
good
with
of you
my
to do that.
kids. So thanks for having me, guys.
All right. It's good.
Thank
We'll
you
look
so
forward
much.
to getting those books and that ebook out to our listeners shortly.
Hey,
Sounds great.
before we tune out, just a little note about who's coming up. On Thursday, we're going to sit down with Bishop Emma Einson from the United Kingdom. Her book, Ambition, is great. And next week, we're going to be with the Baroness of Bethnal Green, Ruth Hunt, who has curated a book, Baroness. So she's in the House of Lords, and her book that she's curated is called The Book of Queer Prophets, incredible book of essays. And on August the 13th, Richard Beck, whose books are incredible. If you haven't read them, pick them up and read them. You'll love it. See, Kevin loves it too. So, and a whole list of people after that. But that's just the next 10 days here.
Okay, great. So, well, until we get together again, thanks again to our sponsors, A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated, to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Many thanks to Carol. And make sure you experience the difference an independent pharmacy can make for you and your loved ones, offering personalized care, short wait times, competitive prices, easy transfer of your prescription, and much more. And, of course, to Molly Maid and Tricia and the gang there. And remember that during these times of COVID, it's so important to keep our families safe, and that means yours too. With the Healthy Home Cleaning System, Molly Maid London is here to help you make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. And that's it for the first episode of season 3. I'm Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity St. Stephen's.
Kevin, George, St. Aidan's.
My name is Ian. Thanks for listening.
Ukulele player.
Our thanks again to Kevin Makins for dropping by. And remember, Kevin, to always look both ways
before you cross the street.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Ian, with original artwork done by Elizabeth Dodman. If you have any questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vickers Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vickers Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!